Austin Tedesco, welcome to Second Nature. Good to meet you, man.
Great to meet you. Thanks so much for having me.
Lutz, you set this up for us because you introduced me to Austin as we were setting up our newsletter on Substack.
Yeah, we've got a man on the inside at Substack, and that's basically what today's podcast is going to be about. Austin helped me get up onto Substack, helped me transfer everything over there and get up and running. And since then, I can't do public math, but I can say without question that my Substack and my newsletter following has grown substantially since I started the Super Rider one. And then we actually host a Second Nature newsletter on there as well. So we've benefited substantially from Austin's insights and really wanted to like drag him in front of the Second Nature audience so he could share some best practices and kind of help people understand what is going on over at Substack, because I think it's really exciting. My experience in the last year has been incredible, and that's really, I think, a good starting point for today.
So yeah, Austin, why don't you get us started? Introduce us to yourself. As I understand it, you sort of lead sports within Substack. So talk about your specific position and how sports in general, outdoor sports in particular, are being discussed and thought about internally.
Yeah, so I started off at Substack overseeing sports partnerships. I've since kind of moved on to overseeing all video and podcast partnerships. That's partially informed by the fact that, especially in the US, very few people are writing about sports, and a lot of people are finding that like a thing they like doing and a thing they make more money doing is talking about sports in podcast form, doing videos for sports. Still plenty of people writing about sports on the platform, but that's how the thing has kind of evolved naturally. I worked at ESPN for a long time before coming to Substack, and yeah, that's what I do. A lot of the job is exactly what Aaron was describing, of like finding people that we think have a lot of potential on the platform, whether that's driving a bunch of new audience over or making money through subscriptions, which is the core of the business model, helping them get set up, helping show them best practices, and then once they're on the platform, being there as like a direct point of contact to help them grow.
So a lot of people have actually migrated over to Substack, people with existing audiences or brands and stuff like that. What do you think is sort of the secret sauce of Substack? Why are people doing that?
Yeah, there's two things that to me differentiate Substack and make it a special platform relative to the competitors out there. One is the network. There's plenty of places you can use for your newsletter publishing, your video and podcast publishing for premium content. But the biggest challenge for anyone in media right now is distribution. And Aaron, you were mentioning this for how you've grown since coming onto the platform. We've had this tool called recommendations for a long time. Lenny, who is one of the biggest publishers on Substack and like a really kind of like legendary product expert, has described recommendations as like a revolutionary tool in like all of internet history. And I think he's right. It was made before I even joined. I can't take any credit for it, but it's the thing where a publisher on the platform will recommend another Substack publication, and there's all these ways in which it gets surfaced to their subscribers, new and old. And rather than relying on like a YouTube algorithm, TikTok algorithms, things that are very, very powerful for driving audience and views, this is like a direct, like creator focused recommendation that drives a ton of growth in a way that you frankly like can't get anywhere else. So there's recommendations. There's also now a short form feed on Substack. It basically, like if you're looking at it, you're like, this looks like Twitter, which it does. And it's like a nice short form scrolling feed that is designed rather than to keep you on the feed, which is what these other short form feeds are designed to do. It's designed to show you things you're likely to actually watch, read, listen to, engage in, and then subscribe to. We're trying to get you off the feed and get you consuming something you're going to love. And so when you publish on Substack, you get direct access to all of these tools to help you grow. So there's that side of it. The other side of it is that you can do anything you want on Substack. You can make anything. You can write like you've always been able to. You can do a podcast. The guys from Throwing Fits, a really big like menswear video podcast, moved over from Patreon to Substack because now they can do video, audio, writing, community. The chat function is really powerful. And people can make it like their true home for what they do. And subscription model, there's nothing more powerful than being able to say like, hey, come here and everything's all in one place. I'm on every platform. I still do video on YouTube. I still post to Instagram. But if you subscribe to me here, you get it all. And I think that's a thing that no one else can really offer.
That's really great. I think the recommendations specifically, I mean, that's been such a huge lever for all of our growth on, both things that we're sending out right now, in that most other newsletters, the best recommendations engine or opportunity is like, oh, share this with 3 people and you get this thing. Whereas this one, it's so much more natural and realistic of like, hey, this is the stuff that I read. You might also, if you like what I write or post, you probably would like this.
Yeah.
The idea too that this is sort of like the source of everything, where you could have a podcast, you could have a video, and your ability to paywall in the middle of stuff, I think, was really interesting as well. For example, and you could speak on this quite a bit more than I probably can, but just how you could actually post up a video and set the amount of time that someone can watch for free before the paywall kicks in, and you can write an article and people can read until the paywall kicks in. And so you have this ability to share some of your work, whereas sometimes people will just paywall the whole thing, like a Patreon or whatever other platform, where it's like you can't see any of this until you pay for it. You get a chance to really kind of preview your work to people, which I think is a way stronger hook to pull people in.
Yeah, it goes back to the like distribution and discovery problem that anyone making things on the internet has right now, right? Is like the thing we're most invested in is getting more people and more high quality people to mostly just become aware of you and start kind of I used to work in like product and content marketing, so I unfortunately talk this way sometimes, like get further down the marketing funnel to become a paid subscriber. And so if you are a video creator on the platform now, this is like, it's still kind of crazy to me that this is possible. Like you upload a video to Substack. When you upload the video, we will give you a free, like automated generated transcript. That transcript will then start creating short form clips for you that can be posted not just to Substack notes, but to a bunch of other platforms. You can make it a fully free video, which will probably drive more total audience growth and total subscribers. But you can also, like you mentioned, paywall a portion of it, maybe find the most compelling minute in the middle of the video that people will then be prompted to upgrade to watch. You can also go live. A lot of people are going live for free and then publishing the video paywalled later. I mean, the reason we got in touch was because the guys from Burn Peak saw this. I frankly had no idea who they were. This is not really my world. I discovered how big they were after talking to them, and they saw the potential here. In some ways, even before I did, they were like, obviously they're huge on YouTube. They're still big on YouTube, but they saw this opportunity to own their audience, which is a big thing on Substack. When you publish a video on YouTube, you have no idea who will see it. Even if people are fans of you, they'll find it. They post a video and everyone who subscribes to them sees it. They're able to monetize it. And they're also able to, it was really important to them, which registered a lot to me, they can make the video they want. You get in this weird space on these other platforms where you're like, what length works? What headline do I need? What thumbnail do I need? And I think I find on Substack often is that because it's a relationship with your audience that you're going to reach, and because it's purely based on subscription and not advertising, the answer to that question is like, what do you think is good? Like, should it just be a 4-minute video? Should it actually be a 2-hour video where I was talking to a food creator the other night where we were brainstorming stuff, and I was telling them, I was like, why don't you just set up a camera and just cook Thanksgiving dinner and just like don't make any edits or cuts? And I'm convinced that would make them more money than if they like cut together a 12-minute video. And like that's a cool thing to see on a platform like this.
So cool. All right, so I want to come back to the owning audience phenomenon here, because I think that's central to Substack and the value proposition. But I'd love to take a step back and hear about your time at ESPN, because that seems like an interesting career arc. And what I'd love to hear, something Aaron and I talk about on the podcast a lot, is this macro trend of institutions to individuals, and ESPN to Substack is kind of the perfect encapsulation of that trend. Personified in your career. I think ESPN is interesting right now because they're sort of trying to pivot in the individual direction in their partnership with Pat McAfee, especially sort of identifying a very popular YouTube creator and then bringing him sort of into linear TV and putting him across so many different sports properties. But, the value there is leveraging his individual personal reputation and brand and personality and not the masthead of ESPN. So take that in whatever direction you want, just in terms of like this macro trend of individuals now being so empowered to create their own media empires, and where Substack sits with that
Yeah,
fact.
I mean, it's a thing that ESPN has been trying to figure out for as long as it's been in existence. Like, and I think the biggest thing that's changed to me is that when I was at ESPN, there was this kind of like understanding internally that when talent would leave ESPN, they would always regret it. It's like kind of like they would never be heard from again in most cases, or they just like, they have these like side projects and then people kind of like they want to come back, they regret leaving. I left ESPN in 2021 as that was starting to change, and I think you could never say that now. I mean, you look at like for one instance, like what Bill Simmons is doing with The Ringer, which has been acquired by Spotify now and building a huge media empire outside of ESPN. And then you look at someone like Ethan Strauss, who left, who was let go by ESPN, went to The Athletic, and now has one of the biggest publications on Substack, doing something that he would never have been allowed to do at ESPN or do anywhere else, where he will sometimes just write about the Warriors defense, but he'll also write about sports media. He'll write about politics. He has a video podcast. And so I think that these, like you're mentioning, Dylan, the creators have much more power and control. And I think these legacy institutions in most cases are struggling to figure out how to take advantage of and monetize that. And I think the individuals themselves are seeing that they have a lot of power when they have this audience, and that they have the ability to generate a lot of real recurring revenue, whether it's through a subscription-based platform like Substack, through a really popular YouTube show with a really strong brand partner or something like that. So there's really no one I have conversations with that is saying this isn't where things are heading even more. Even in film and television, I think this is starting to become more of a real thing. So yeah, I find it really, really interesting. And I worked at ESPN for the first 6 years of my career. I started there as an intern. So it was a really like formative place to work, but I could not be happier to be out of that environment now.
It's interesting that you kind of mentioned distribution, because I think that's one of the key levers that Substack has over everyone else. Every other institution, platform, whatever you want to call it, you have to interface with an algorithm that you have to please in order to get in front of whoever you're trying to get in front of. Whereas Substack, if someone actually subscribes to you, they get everything you send to them. And if you look at the open rate of my stuff and then what people are actually connecting, I mean, it's an order of magnitude higher than any other platform that I'm posting on. I can post on any other platform, and I sort of have to pray that the people that signed up to see my stuff are going to get it. Where on Substack, the people who signed up to read or watch or interact with your content are actually receiving it, which seems so simple.
It seems very simple, but it's oh yeah, go ahead, Don.
Well, I was just going to say, this is the perfect segue to the owned audience conversation. So, I mean, we could go to just the very basics 101 level here of like what Aaron's talking about. Like, because I mean, what I see now is that Substack is becoming the bottom of the funnel for a ton of creators. So if you make your living by making YouTube videos, or you're an Instagram influencer, or you're hot on TikTok, aside from YouTube, which as I understand it monetizes pretty well as long as you're really big, for everybody else, in order to own your audience, you need something at the bottom of the funnel, which Substack has become, it seems like, for a lot of people. So just talk about the importance of owning your audience for creators and how Substack helps people, achieve that?
Yeah, I think it's the reason why it's like this like beautiful simplicity, like Aaron mentioned, is really because of the business model. Is that like the only way that we make money is through our 10% cut of the subscription revenue. The only thing that we are incentivized to care about is getting you more total subscribers and more paid subscribers, though total subscribers are like the most primed people to eventually convert to paid. And I think in terms of like the future of where this space is headed, like I think more and more people are realizing that whether you are just starting out as a creator online for the first time, that you can make real money by getting 100 paid subscribers, and then 200, and then 1,000, and then maybe it starts to become something that pays your rent. Maybe it becomes something that becomes a full-time job for you. And the differentiator on Substack for me is that, unlike on Patreon or Supporting Cast or another platform like that, where the like audience ownership is still kind of like central to the mission with subscription, is that you get like you can have a custom domain on your website. And Aaron, I think yours is like subdomained and attached to your like your regular website, which is really powerful. It's really powerful to be on these other channels where people know you, to be on a podcast like this and just say like, oh, just go to superwriter.com. If you go to superwriter.com, there's like, the Substack, and it's not really a Substack. It's like your thing is attached right there. As opposed to, like, I tell everyone I work with, I was like, don't tell people to go to like, superwriter.substack.com. All of a sudden people stop listening. It's like, you have this real ownership of this thing you've built. And I think people are much, much more likely to subscribe to that and want to be a part of it.
Totally. Aaron, I'd love to just talk about our personal reading habits here, because I just have my inbox open here and I just counted the number of newsletters that I've received today, sort of since midnight last night. And I've received 8 newsletters. And where I want to go with this is just the shifting way that people are interacting with the written word. I think I'm a perfect example of this, in that it's very rare for me to navigate to one of my favorite websites to consume a written article. And Austin, you may not listen to the show, so we should establish that Aaron and I are big readers personally. We're constantly recommending books and sharing our reflections on the things that we're consuming there. But my newsletter consumption has, totally replaced what I used to do on the traditional internet. And I think Substack, because of what you're articulating here, and that your incentives are aligned with the creators, and that the only way that you guys make money is through generating new subscribers for them, also creates a much better user experience for the reader. In that, if you go to, an online publisher from yesteryear, typically they have some sort of a subscription business model also, plus some ads on top of it. So you end up like having to agree to the cookies. You end up seeing a bunch of crazy, terrible banner ads, and then you hit a paywall, and it's just a horrific reading experience. It's totally distracting, and it ends up, encouraging you to just click out of the tab. That's my personal experience. Lucy, I'd love for you to share like how you're reading now, and if you sort of feel similarly, and maybe we can pass it to Austin in terms of just like the actual user experience of Substack and how you work on that.
I think that when it comes back to my personal habits, it really is that I don't have time to read everything, and I'm looking for help curating the best insights and the best information to rip through as fast as I can, so that I can stay up to speed with everything. And something that I see across a lot of the Substack channels that I follow is exactly that curation, where people are pulling together the most important stuff and sharing just that. The Super Rider one, for example, that I put together is my favorite mountain bike videos from the week. And so every Monday you start your week off with like the best mountain bike videos that have dropped in the last 7 days. And so that way you don't have to scour every single website and hit refresh on YouTube 100 times to try to get the best stuff. It's just there waiting for you, and you just watch like your top 3 and like, oh, that was sick, thanks, moving on. And I think that works really well for the thousands of people that are online. And I look for other ones that can kind of pull together the insights for business and media and the categories that we care most about. And that's where I find the most. And I think if you look across Substack, Austin, you probably have more insight on this than me, but I feel like there's a lot of curation in a meaningful way that can help kind of shortcut your process to like finding the best stuff, the kind of greatest hits.
Yeah, and I think that's been maybe like the heart of newsletters from the beginning since they were invented. Is it's either the goal is I've done all of the work and research, and you can trust me to bring you the stuff you want. The people who are extremely successful are people like Emily Sundberg, who runs this newsletter on Substack called Feed Me. She's grown tremendously in the past year because what Emily does is she's not just saying, hey, these are the like 8 things that you need to read in business and culture today. But she's able to say, like, I texted the person the story is about, and I know what's actually happening here. And I have this like both expert insight and opinion, but also reporting. When someone does that, I think that's when they like really start to take off. So there's that element of it. And then I think the other thing that works really well is someone who says like, hey, actually, I have the one thing to say that matters today. And rather than doing curation, I'm like, I'm Noah Smith and I am going to be ahead of something, or I'm going to respond to a trend in a way no one else has thought of. And Dylan, like what you were saying, that is so much more powerful when you agree to have this intimate experience that you're going to let someone into your inbox, a thing that I think everyone is either like very protective of or has like given up on because they have 20,000 unread emails and they like don't even know what the hell is happening inside of that space. And yeah, like those two things I think are really important. And I mean, I am, while the kind of the being the video podcast person at Substack, as a consumer, I'm really just a voracious reader, and I am like really diligent about kind of not subscribing to too many things, whether it's on Substack or otherwise, because I that's like an important relationship, and I want to make sure that I'm seeing the things that matter to me, you know?
Yeah. Are people going to actually navigate to web pages to read in the future, though? That's
I
kind
really
of
don't
my
think
question.
so. Like I think this is a big debate that's happening right now in like the online discourse. The team at Hellgate gave this interview recently where they were talking about how they've like embraced a website redesign, and it looks great. I'm a huge fan of what they do. And I just like strongly disagree that that should be something anyone is investing in. Like plenty of people on Substack actually will come to me and say like, there's all of these like homepage redesign things that I would love to be able to do. And from a branding perspective, I really get it. From a perspective of like, I want someone to hit my Substack or my personal website because I've turned that into my Substack and I want it to represent me well. Like that makes sense. But when people are talking about like, I want people to be able to click in 4 times or scroll down the page, I'm like, no one's doing that. No
Yeah.
one is doing that. Like a question we get a lot is like, why are y'all pushing this app so much? Like, why are you so focused on this? And there's a few reasons. One, nothing is driving more subscriptions than that app. That app is driving so many new subscriptions for people that it's competing with the recommendation tooling that Aaron mentioned, that short form feed, but also like these email clients like Google and Apple Mail are more and more invested in using AI summaries of emails and making the delivery of the thing you actually created less reliable. And we make sure that you get the thing you signed up for. And also that like it's frankly really powerful that when like Casey Lewis publishes a new thing of After School that I really want to read in the morning, that I now just get a notification on the Substack app that she posted it, and I click it and I read it, and I never visit the website for that thing, but it's like an essential part of my day now. So I think that those days are over of the homepage like discovery clicking thing. I wouldn't be investing any time in that personally.
It's so funny. Yesterday, I got a text from somebody about some weird UFO related congressional hearing. It's just like, a random, group chat thread. And I clicked through just to read it. And it was just the most horrific reading experience as somebody who has now become conditioned to reading a ton of newsletters that arrive in my inbox every morning, but I have not messed around much with either the audio feature or listening to native Substack podcasts, nor the app personally. Lucy, did you have anything else you wanted to go on that?
It just kind of hit me that the app itself is sort of like your curated newsfeed. You found people that you trust. You found people that are capable of delivering really useful and impactful information on a daily basis. And then you're curating your own version of it. And this is not X or anything else that's like 140 characters. This is like well thought out, deeply researched or curated pieces of content that you're going to get access to and you're going to spend time with. And I haven't really thought about the app that way. And interestingly, our Second Nature newsletter has more app subscribers than my Super Rider one, which is like triple the size. So Second Nature crew is way ahead of the curve, I guess.
Yeah, and we do like the feed on the app is driven by an algorithm. It's just driven by an algorithm with entirely different goals in mind. The goals are to drive more like we want you to read stuff. We want you to listen to an entire episode of Throwing Fits. We want you to see a short form clip and then watch the full video. We don't want you to stay on the feed, and we want to make sure that when you're a Super Rider fan and they post something that shows up in the feed, but that if you're recommending something from Super Rider, that shows up in the feed too, because those people might be interested in it.
Austin, I'd love to there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are in the outdoor industry or need to sort of demonstrate their expertise on the internet. And I think Substack is like the perfect place to do that. Could you just give us a primer for people that are, this is like the talk that you have probably like 100 times a day with people, helping them get set up. But could you just run down just some of the main insights that you typically share to get up and running with Substack for someone who doesn't have one yet?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice we give to everyone we talk to is like just start. Like the thing that happens the most of people is that they sit there and they literally at times take years sitting there being like, it's got to look and be set up perfect, and I got to have a full content plan for the first 6 months and all this stuff, and then they never start. And because of the way the network works, if you never start, that's all this time that you could have been getting recommendations, new subscribers, bigger audience. And so I think once you feel ready to go, like just go. And then frankly, I have my own Substack. I used to work in kitchens, so I have my own Substack about food. And I had my own for like 4 months that I posted on every week before I told anyone about it. But even getting that going was like really good for me. And I know other people have felt the same way. That's my first piece of advice is like, don't wait around. Just do it. Even do it and don't like distribute it, but do it and figure it out. The other thing we were thinking about, all right, like what do I do? What is like a guiding principle? There's two things to me that are essential to success on the platform, especially like monetary success if you want to actually drive some paid subscriptions. One is having a basically like a one sentence elevator pitch for what you're doing, that not only that you can say, but that your subscribers would be able to say when they recommend it to people. And that has to have like an urgency to subscribe. And I think in the outdoor space, that's like actually like very attainable. There's a thing that I will tell the people in the sports space often that I actually think in sports in particular, you're way more likely to make money and drive subscriptions and things that are potentially like maybe a little bit smaller or niche or have this like urgency to subscribe, that like if you're a Detroit Lions beat reporter, you're way more likely to me to make a lot of money through subscriptions than someone who covers the NFL as a whole. And so if you are an expert in a thing that people really, really care about, and that you're like the only person they can get that from, and you have like this angle and voice on it that they can't get anywhere else, maybe the ceiling on the amount of people you'll be able to reach is lower than someone else, but your ability to get people to pay for it and even just sign up for your list is way higher. And so I would focus on that. I would like start to think about what that is as you're getting going. Frankly, it's going to change. Like you'll be 3 weeks in and it'll change, but really start to focus on that. And then the other thing that's incredibly important is that we encourage people to think of a thing they could do to build community around the Substack itself. What can you do to make this more than a piece of text that hits people's inbox? whether that's building a really robust like chat community using we have like a Discord competitor product inside of Substack called Chat as well, where people can like have conversations with each other, with you. I think video alone does that. You know, maybe even like once a month you do a live video and people feel like they're connected with you. But um, the kind of guiding principle there for me is that I'm convinced that something less than 50% of the reason people pay to subscribe to something on Substack is to literally unlock a piece of content. And something more than 50% is because of some like emotional urgency they feel to like be a part of something. And the most successful people on Substack, I think they haven't hacked it. They haven't like sat down and be like, what is this? They like just kind of create in a way that facilitates that. And so I encourage people to like keep that in mind when they're thinking big picture about what they want to do on the platform.
Perhaps the most important insight of our episode here today. Austin, you mentioned Emily Sundberg. I actually read the Semaphore Media newsletter about Emily Sundberg's success on Substack recently, and it makes me want to ask about something I have heard as somebody who has tried to make a career in media over the last few years, that there's two ways to make money, basically unbundling and rebundling. And Substack very much is the unbundling of a lot of traditional media publications, but there is some rebundling happening, including with Emily to some degree. I know she mentioned that she's bringing on writers to help her. In other words, it's not going to be exclusively her voice going forward, but it'll be led by her with maybe some contributors. I know Barry Weiss has now built the Free Press exclusively on Substack, and that's like basically what looks like a 21st century modern digital publishing business, but it's built on top of Substack. In other words, they're rebundling on top of the platform. Comments on that?
I love it. Like the worst thing that can happen is for us is that people basically like feel a need to graduate out of Substack, is that you start as a newsletter writer and you're like, oh, now that I want a media company, I want to go somewhere else. And it's amazing that that's not happening, right? Like Emily is actually launching a podcast as part of Feed Me. I know she's mentioned that she's promoting that. Barry and the Free Press are an incredible example. Mehdi Hassan's Zateo is like this huge media company that has multiple shows attached to it. And it's a thing we've invested in because we want people to continue to have that ownership and that like wild ability to grow and take advantage of the network all on the platform. I will say that a thing I've seen that continues to be true, and I'm just frankly really curious if it remains true, is that having a personality, having a human being that people really care about at the center of these media companies in a subscription model, I think remains pretty important. Like, I think no matter what Emily builds Feed Me into, like Emily is a lot of the draw. The Free Press has like wildly talented people all across it, but like still very much associated with Barry. Same thing for Mehdi and Zateo. And I'll be really curious if someone is able to do what is like maybe like a more true bundle. Dylan is like, oh, could a podcast network that's built around 8 different like mini series and like fiction properties have success on Substack if there isn't like one host tying it together? Will people actually pay for a bundle that's at its heart less attached to like a person? I honestly don't know. I'll say that like I don't think we have a great success example of it, and I don't think another platform does as well.
Mm.
And it's the kind of thing that a place like ESPN is dealing with at the moment too.
So interesting. And Emily is the perfect example of what you just said. And I'm not somebody who's a subscriber or long-term reader of hers. I've just listened to her speak on a couple of podcasts and read that Semaphore article about her. But I think her audience probably falls into what you just described, in that they're probably not subscribing to unlock individual pieces of content, but because they connect with her on some emotional level.
Yeah. And I mean, if people are thinking about like, what should I do? How could I possibly build this thing. She's one example of someone who started posting, I think like she started like on Substack like 2 years ago,
So
and is like,
crazy.
you look at, it's like one of those classic like hockey stick growth curves of just kind of like chipping away every day, and being really smart about free and paid, about total audience growth. And like there's a thing, actually, if we're talking about tips for starting, I think another thing that people struggle with from the start, or maybe is not totally intuitive to them, is that people come in wanting paid subscribers. Like, of course you want paid subscribers. That's really important. And they start paywalling things early on. And I do actually think in most cases that you're better off with a smaller proportion of paywalled content if you have a less established presence in making things premium to start, of like proving what the thing is, getting people excited about it, getting people attached to it, and then starting to maybe more slowly roll out premium, and then starting to slowly tip into what you think your final mix of free and paid is. I talk to people sometimes who are like, well, why would I publish a free newsletter today or a free podcast today? Like, I want to convert people to paid. And it's like, you're getting people more primed to pay by seeing how good you are, by wanting to share it with their friends. And actually, like, if something is paywalled, even if 80% of it is free and then just the last 20% of it is paywalled, some people just dump out of the piece entirely, or they won't share it with a friend. And like, I'm all for paywalling stuff. I encourage way more paywalling. I think like sometimes people are hesitant to do it, but if you're just starting out, I think proving things out from the start is a better way to get that long-term growth.
Absolutely. You've got to have that momentum. You've got to have you have to have people trust you and believe that you're going to continue making this stuff. And, the thing that I think is so fascinating is that there are so many different ways, not only to monetize, but also to put out content. You can create podcasts through Substack. You can create videos through Substack. I think, and obviously you can write a ton of stuff. You can write the notes. You can have the chat. You can send out the newsletters. Anything you want to do there. I think it's really interesting, kind of digging into how people do stuff. So for the example you talked about earlier, Burn Peak, the thing that they do, they're a YouTube channel / media empire, but the reason why people pay for their channel is because you get to see what they're making 2 weeks before it goes live on their YouTube channel. So you're essentially buying the preview as well as some in-depth insight for written articles where there's no other place for them to share those written articles. So there's different ways where you could offer something that you couldn't offer somewhere else. If Seth decided to do a podcast, it would be obvious that it would first start on Substack. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually share or develop paid only offerings that you wouldn't even be able to create anywhere else. And you'd already have a built-in audience for it. And I think that's kind of what you're after too, is like this idea of the built-in audience. If we're talking in the funnel analogy, you've got however many thousands of people at the top of the funnel, and there are going to be people at the bottom of the funnel that are willing to support what you're doing and allow you to go even further with it.
Aaron, do you know who Emily Sundberg is?
Only because of this discussion.
So I don't know. I think it's worthwhile to just like share a little bit, because again, I don't know a ton about her either, but from the Semaphore article, I think it said that she's like the 5th or 6th largest creator on Substack by paid subscribers.
Yeah, so Emily's a good friend of mine, so I'm not gonna pretend to like not know her super well. So she started on Substack while she was working for Meta, and was seeing the writing on the wall that like her team might get broken up, and she might be like looking for a job. And so she started posting like short horror adjacent fiction on the platform, and then realized that she actually had this passion for and interest in like a different kind of business news and culture through the lens of business. And it became this daily newsletter that has grown to have, I think she said this before, like 50,000 subscribers. It is the 5th highest grossing business newsletter on the platform now. I used to live in New York. I now live in LA. it's very difficult to talk to someone in the media space in New York and not have her name come up. And it's it's incredible for us at Substack to see it happen, because it's an entirely like homegrown star that's happened here
Right.
and built it up from just a thing she started writing every day, and a real passion for it. And
Yeah.
I would
That
just say
was,
the real to me the real lesson from it more than anything is that like the format is a thing that I think maybe you've in some cases seen before in a format that other people try to replicate. And the differentiator is the quality of the information, the reporting, and the her voice and angle on things, and that's what people come back for.
yeah. I just think it's a remarkable success story. Obviously, she's a uniquely talented individual, but starting only 2 years ago to now being one of the highest grossing newsletters on the platform, it shows just how much the media business has changed, and the removal of these moats and the ability for anybody to share their voice with the world can take you from being, sort of an anonymous person within a gigantic organization like Meta to now owning her own destiny and building an amazing personal business. And she's probably in her late 20s or early 30s at this point. So
Yeah.
sky's the limit. So let's bring this back to sports, because we're sports dudes here. But both Aaron and I own our own sort of consumer facing media businesses, mine in trail running, his in mountain biking. You mentioned Ethan Strauss earlier. So the Substacks that I subscribe to are typically like trade media focused, business focused. I luckily am off the politics, so fewer of those arriving in my inbox. But um, I don't subscribe to a ton of traditional sporting newsletters. I need to get on the Ethan Strauss train. But trends that you're seeing in the sports media landscape, or ways people can leverage the Substack platform to, in the sporting sphere specifically.
Yeah, so we're actually in the middle. I mean, this is like a publicly listed on our website. We're hiring a new sports lead as I like start thinking of other things at the company. So I've been having
Job of
these
the
conversations.
week. Job of the
Someone hit
week.
me up. Yeah, hit me up if you think you're the right person. And so I've been having a lot of conversations about this. And I go into every interview for this job being like, you tell me what you think we should do, because this space is really weird. Like the sports space is flooded with free content that is a mix of like high to low quality, but a lot of different kind of things rise to the top. In the subscription space, there's some things that undeniably work in sports, and they might be a little adjacent to outdoor sports, but like fantasy and gambling, like people pay for that stuff. Local sports, people definitely pay for. Like, I'm the best person covering the Dallas Cowboys. It's like that. Bob Sturm has a really successful Substack by doing that, by being like the guy for Dallas sports. And to me, that's a replicable model for the outdoor sports world, is that you're like, what are you the expert in, whether it's expert analysis or expert instruction? I have joked around internally that like, I think someone could like probably shoot to number one on the sports leaderboard if the right person just did like tennis instructional videos. If it was like, whether it's a like professional tennis player or the right tennis pro, because there's like a high disposable income group with an enormous urgency to pay to subscribe because they want to get better at this sport. And so there's that like instructional side of it. There's the analysis side of it that does really well. And then I think the other thing that works well in sports, especially with like kind of the looming death of sports Twitter a bit, is that people don't have a place to like hang out and follow sports together. And I think like someone like Mark Stein has built up a good following on Substack because he's an incredible reporter, but also because the chat space for Stein is where so many people go to just hang out during NBA games. They're like, this is actually the most fun, smart place on the internet when a trade happens, when a game happens. And I think if you think about the outdoor world, I would think about that too, right? Like, is your value prop actually that you are the curator of the space for everyone who cares about your corner of the outdoor sports world talks and learns and hangs out and frankly like jokes around together.
Mm. And they're interacting with the chat feature within the app. Is that correct?
Yeah, it works the best in the app. You can do it on desktop as well, and you have complete control of that space as the publisher. So you can make it so that like only you can start a chat thread. That's what I would do. I find the ones where anyone can start a chat thread like overwhelming and crazy, but there's someone like Laura Riley who runs a magazine on Substack, which is this like incredible fashion newsletter, has this like wonderful chat where all of these like brilliant subscribers of her in the fashion space are like asking each other questions, are identifying what someone is wearing in a TV show, and they all are kind of like always talking together. And so you control that, you control what's free or paid. And for a lot of people I know who like are paid subscribers to Substacks, the one of the first things they say for why is they're like, I love the chat. They're like, I have to be in the chat. That's like maybe not the reason people convert, but it's a lot of the reason people engage every day.
And you said, yeah, it's sort of like a Discord
It's a
competitor in
Discord-esque
some.
thing, but it's like intention. I just want to be transparent. It's like it's intentionally less like full scale in its product capabilities of like it doesn't have like 20 channels and threads and stuff. It's like designed to be more intimate on purpose. And so
Very
I would
cool.
think of it that way.
So shorter form content also in the Substack portfolio. And it's funny, I'm just remembering this now, but I read also this week, I'm not expecting you to comment on this, but the New York Times reported that Elon Musk had, I think, approached Substack and the CEO founder, Chris Best, about acquiring Substack at some point after he took over Twitter/X, and that approach was rebuffed by Chris Best and the
Yeah,
Substack team.
Kristen consult me on that.
Yeah, okay. No comment. No comment. Lutzi, what else do you have? I want to go to AI eventually, but we can start winding down. Do you have more for Austin here?
I'd love to hear your AI questions.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
There.
Let's
All
go.
right.
I'm stoked.
So part of our running, sort of like trends on Second Nature is that Lutzi's always optimistic. I'm always pessimistic as people who are making our living as creators. And I saw this week that some study came out about how there was a group of people where, it was like a legit peer-reviewed study, and the findings, to summarize, were that people preferred AI-generated poetry. And it just made my heart sink. And I have not messed around with a lot of the generative AI tools, but as I understand it, and the little that I have experienced of ChatGPT and the like, are that they're immensely good at just generating words. And Substack, the core feature is, a place to publish your words and for writers to write. So it would feel to me that, if there is an existential risk to the business, it's that people don't write in the future, people don't read in the future, machines write and summarize, and people will consume small tidbits. So that's my,
I think it's a very fair AI pessimistic take. I'll say AI is really important to the future of Substack. We have a Slack channel called Model Behavior that's extremely active, and the reason why it's important for us is that I would say probably this is not backed in any real data. This is an estimate. Like 98% of people on Substack are sole individuals running what are becoming big media companies on their own. And there's so many things we can do using AI to make that job easier for them. Like I mentioned, you upload a podcast to Substack. If it's a video podcast, we do the transcript for you. We generate clips for you. We use AI to generate the clips that are going to be the most interesting and most likely to be shared. I don't do this, but I know people, and this isn't actually baked into the platform yet, but I know people who are investing in these tools on other platforms where you're writing and you're stuck and you use AI not to finish it, but to be like, prompt me for where I should go next. I am probably too precious to do that. Like I wouldn't do that, but I think it's a cool tool that exists. Like Dylan, I can really identify with what you're saying because I live in perpetual fear of accidentally like having my favorite song of the year be an AI generated song that Spotify like surfaced to me. Like that would make me feel horrible. And so I like refuse to engage in those kinds of discovery channels purely out of fear, I think. But I really don't see it as a threat to us because of the business model. Because I'm actually really skeptical that people will sign up for recurring subscriptions to something that's generated by AI. Like I am skeptical that that's like one thing that I like tell people about Substack and why it's different is that if you look at the Substack leaderboards, if you look at that business leaderboard that Emily's on, if you look at the sports leaderboard that Ethan is on, maybe they're people who you don't like. Maybe they're people who you're like, I disagree with them or like they're not my thing. But you can't say they're not good. Like the people who are driving lots of paid subscriptions are really, really good at what they do. And that's how they get all these paid subscriptions. They didn't growth hack it. They didn't do some weird stuff to get up to the top. And I think AI can only help them do their jobs better and help more people climb those leaderboards. And I'm really, really skeptical that the AI based content that people pay for will become a threat to our business or similar businesses.
Oh, thank God. Lucy, do you feel better?
Big, deep breath.
I will be employed for at least another
Yeah.
year.
I mean, I think like I think this is actually especially true for both of you. Is like I think there will be different winners in this space, right? I think like I have seen people with enormous followings on other channels come to Substack and they're like, why do I have 4 paid subscribers? I have 1 million followers on TikTok. And I'm like, maybe those people are good at a certain kind of thing. And maybe one of the things they're good at is hitting on the TikTok algorithm and getting people to hit this like low intent follow button. But a thing I know y'all are really good at is driving high intent interest. And that is like the heart of what Substack is built around. And it creates different types of winners in this kind of ecosystem. And I do think there's a world where like that disparity gets much bigger in like this more AI infused space where like platforms and channels that are designed around algorithms designed to make money through ads might have AI as winners or people who like know how to use that well, whereas channels designed around high quality content and subscriptions, ideally will only have human beings as winners, I hope.
Yeah, so interesting. And yeah, you get out what you put in, right? And it would take a while to build a subscriber base on Substack for most people, independent of how popular or famous they are on other platforms. And it reminds me that, there is that network effect within Substack, and leaving it can have negative consequences. I'm thinking about a couple of people whose stuff I follow, Casey Newton and Brian Morrissey, both have moved off the platform and said that, it has been materially challenging for their business losing that network effect that was inherent in Substack. So anyway,
I'll say on the outdoor front, like just we're talking about it, like Michael Easter, who I really love, who's like great at working in this space. He's written about this publicly. Like he left Substack to set up his own publication on Ghost, and he came back a few months later, and he actually came back. He said this publicly too, partially because of the growth stuff and the network stuff, but he mostly came back because of the community stuff. There is some like magic in these tools that get people to comment and engage more than they do on other platforms. And I would encourage people, I think, who are interested in what y'all do and are looking at Substack stuff to definitely check out what Michael's doing. He's a great example of how to build a business on Substack too.
So interesting. You mentioned Lenny Rajitsky, who's got to be one of the biggest publications on Substack too. I've heard him say, he'll never leave. Like he fully feels the 10% take is like fully justifiable, even if, all that money would otherwise likely go into his pocket, that Substack provides so much value for him that it's a no-brainer. So I have a sort of a quick idea that we can use to wind things down, unless you got something else here, Lucy.
Go for it.
Let's do it.
So we've got a closing segment here, Austin, that we call BPC, brand product content, where we typically we'll share. It's usually when just Aaron and I are together, but I had a little spontaneous idea that maybe we could all share our favorite Substack publications here to close the show today, as a way to sort of bring BPC into our interview with Austin. What do you think, Aaron?
I'm ready as long as you promise not to take my favorite
No,
Substack.
then you can go first.
Honestly, my favorite one that I read, I've got two.
I know exactly where you're going, so just go ahead and take both of them.
Okay. First of all, Matt Trappy's Matter of Brand. I'm really, every single article that comes out of that one, absolutely for me is my favorite. I don't know. He's been doing a really great job of just getting people to come in and talk and share additional stuff. So it's not just his insights, although his insights are good. He's also bringing in other people that are experts to have discussions, which I really get a big kick out of. And then I've got to give some love to my buddy Dre. He writes a one called Brand New Story, and it's these really deep, well thought out stuff about different brands, not necessarily in the outdoor space, but every single one, like the second it hits my inbox, I just like stop everything and I have to read every single time he publishes. It's just like everything in my life just grinds to a halt for like a good 15 minutes, 10 minutes to read it, and then 5 minutes for me to like put my brain back together. So
Austin, you should check out both those publications. They're very
I'm
good.
subscribing to all the ones y'all recommend.
Okay,
after
cool.
this.
Yeah, Matt Trappy's is actually very new. He's probably sent out less than 10 newsletters at this point,
Cool.
and it's a freaking great product. So
Yeah,
Cool.
check
I'm
that
excited to
out.
check it out.
yeah.
All
What
right,
about you,
Austin.
Dylan?
You
Oh,
okay?
yeah, I'll go ahead. I've mentioned plenty, so I'll mention one I haven't said yet, which is like I mentioned, I used to work in restaurants. Most of what I subscribe to is food based. There's this woman, Claire de Burr, who runs Stissing House in New York. She does kind of like traditional like recipe based writing. But the thing I love about Claire, who to me is like one of the best food writers in America, is Claire writes about food and cooking in this way that will break you free from using recipes. She is always like writing in this way that like even without saying it explicitly makes you be like, I actually don't need to follow a recipe. I know what to look for. I know how to trust my instincts. I know how to actually become a better cook and love cooking in a way that is so different from what anyone else does because of the like one, how brilliant Claire is as a chef and also how great she is as a writer. And to me is like a great example of potentially what your audience can do is like if you just looked at Claire's and didn't read it, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's like a bunch of stuff like this out there. But she has this voice and this approach that's really different. And she's someone like me, like Aaron mentioned, that like if Claire shows up in my inbox, I read it right away because I'm gonna like learn and feel something in a way that other people can't really do for me.
Perfect. All right. So then my equivalent of the instant drop everything and read newsletters on Substack, I'll stay within trail running. Though I do want to give a shout out to Steve Holmberg, also multiple time Second Nature guest and longtime listener. He's got a great Substack, The Field Report, sort of in that same brand category. But mine in trail running, number one, there's a great sort of business of trail running newsletter, B2B oriented, called Trail Mix. That's written by Matt Walsh, a guy who's based in the UK, so has his finger on the pulse of what's happening on the industry side of trail running specifically. So it's a great, I think, example of creating like a niche inside of a niche and kind of owning it and building a brand around it. And then from that point, you can kind of expand, and I'll be excited to see how he continues to build that platform on Substack. And then also more consumer facing, not B2B. One of the great athletes in trail running, an American guy who lives in France, his name's Ben Demon. He's got a Substack called The Speed Demon. And he's got a really interesting way that he thinks about training. So his Substack is very training oriented and just sort of summarizes, catalogs what he's doing as he builds up to these big events. And he's just started using the podcast functionality within Substack. So I've listened to a couple of things that he's published recently in audio, and those have been the first things that I've listened to on Substack. I've been exclusively reading only in the newsletter format, not within the app. And it's opened my eyes to, how much I've just only scratched the surface of how the platform can be used and how creators are using it effectively. So those are my two contributions here to close the show:
Cool.
Trail Mix and the Speed Demon.
Cool. I'm excited to check them out.
Dude, Austin, you're the man. Thanks for coming on the show.
This was so much fun. Thanks for the
Yeah.
invite.
Thanks for all the assistance along the way too. You've helped us really just put it together. So
I'm so happy y'all are here. I love getting people on Substack, and I love doing dorky tech support too, which we did a lot of when Aaron was first getting started.
Yeah. All right. Subscribe to secondnature.media, our Substack.
There we go.
Yeah, and
Love
also Super Riders on the platform too. So make sure you click through and subscribe there. Also, go apply for the job.
Please, we need someone to run sports here. So I would love for the audience to apply.
Be careful. You're about to get inundated with second naturalists. Austin, thanks so much for coming on the show, dude. Let's do it again.
Would love it. Thanks, y'all.